Welcome back, everybody. Dr. Greg Eckel, and this is What the Health. And we are talking electrosensitivity and EMFs today with the EMF guy, Nicolas Pineault, #1 best-selling author of the Non-Tinfoil Guide to EMFs, which I have on my bookshelf. Thank you, Nicolas. An advocate for safe technologies. Through his unconventional approach of blending humor, science, and common sense, he's becoming a leading voice on the topic of electromagnetic pollution and how it affects our health. For the last few years, Nick has been interviewing some of the best minds on health and technology, facilitating the creation of courses and educational materials to raise awareness of this very important issue. He's got a summit coming out in early 2024. You can find more about Nick at the emfguy.com. Welcome aboard.
Thanks so much for having me.
I always learn so much with talking to you, and I know my viewers and listeners, this is one of those topics that, I love that you titled your book, The Non-Tinfoil Guide. And you have some very practical applications in there, and there is more and more science coming out. We just are not hearing about it on mainstream media. However, more and more of us are tuning into frequencies and its effects for health and for ill health. And before we jumped on here, you said one component is really talking about electrosensitivity, as we're kind of bathed in the 5G world and more frequencies coming in our commons in public areas. What are some common sources of EMFs? #1, what is EMF? And then what are some common sources?
Sure. Well, talking about man-made EMFs, electromagnetic fields or electromagnetic frequencies, and we're literally bathed in different frequencies, and many of them are natural, comes from just the Earth's natural magnetism. We have the Schumann resonance. It's about 7.83 hertz, and then different variations of that or different multipliers of this frequency as well. So it's not just one frequency, but it's multiple. And then we have the entire visible spectrum, sunlight. We know that all of these things we have been exposed to for millennia to billions of years. All of biology is compatible with certain frequencies that have always been hitting the planet Earth. However, our modern use of technology with the advent of electricity to then radio waves to TV waves, TV broadcasting antennas, and then to cell phones, and then to Wi-Fi and Bluetooth more recently, and even new cellular networks that are more and more installed more and more closer to people's homes, such as the 5G networks, small antennas that they call them. It's a bit of a misnomer because they're just as powerful as the 4G antennas, except that in certain situations they're much closer to people's bedroom or just living spaces. So all of these technologies are using frequencies that at this kind of power level we have never been exposed to. So it's just in the last 150 years that we started introducing these new technologies, and the health effects have always been discussed since then and debated, I would say, because of course there's a large industry that can profit off of these products, and also they bring benefits to our life. That's undeniable. Connectivity, if we can say that connectivity also comes with bad problems if you're too much on social media and whatnot, but also it can lead to great things. Connectivity, free access to the internet, and well, I don't know if that's free, but still, many technologies are part of life now and kind of help society move forward, and they're kind of part of life. So in this discussion, when you say, well, maybe these devices are unsafe or they are triggering in certain people symptoms related to electrosensitivity, that's a controversial thing to say. But I'd say that more and more mainstream scientists now are reading the scientific literature, the medical literature, and realizing, my God, there's a vast amount of science that has been produced, and it shows some areas of concern, and then other areas, what is especially concerning is what we don't know. how little data do we have about many of these health effects? We just have hints of animal data or in vitro studies on certain things, like brain health, for example, is a good example. We don't have much on brain health. We have brain cancer risks, but what about brain health in general? You're hard pressed to find this area of science where you kind study the oxidative stress caused by a cell phone, or let's say just the fact that many people use Bluetooth earbuds these days, right? Instead of that annoying tangling wire that's always, kind of twisting itself and doing a thousand knots in your bag. Well, instead you can have Bluetooth, but it comes with a price. This is radio frequency radiation, very close to the ear canal, very close to the brain, and there's a hole in our cranium. So I mean, it's exposing the brain could be exposing the brain to a greater extent compared to a phone, although we don't even have good data on how like what are the power levels of these things in the first place. So it's all blurry, and there's much speculation you can find online, but many scientists are starting to err on the side of precaution, because they say, my God, we've seen, this trail of scientific studies for the last several decades, and we should probably tell the public to lower exposure. If it's just from cell phone in a pocket linked with the reduction of fertility in men, or cell phone to the brain with the different brain tumors that seem to increase if you talk on a phone for, in certain studies, they define heavy users for 30 minutes per day talking on the phone. I mean, it means a large segment of the population might fall in this category. And if it's not in here, well, for some people might have exposure to the thyroid or parotid gland, for example, and there are other cancers of the neck and head regions that might be correlated to cell phone use. So many people are starting to say, well, even if we don't know definitively what these things can do to the body, is that really what we want to do? Do we want to wait for definitive proof of harm, or is that always how it's done with toxic agents, and then we cause such a burden on the population as a result, instead of starting to say, okay, well, obviously there might be health effects, even if it's just in a segment of the population. How can we make these things safer? But the discussion is not even there yet, quite unfortunately. So it's in the industry, they're not aiming to reduce cell phone emissions by 1%, nothing like that. Eventually, I think public pressure will win, but that's what I'm trying to do, really, to spread this message of awareness and prevention.
Yeah, it just seems prudent. It's a big unknown. You're not saying, hey, you're not a Luddite. You're saying, hey, these are the benefits of the technology, but perhaps we don't know. I mean, there's wide regulations of you can't put cell phone towers on schools. Now that gets blurred really quickly, because then you see a school with a cell phone towers. Like, what in the world are we doing there? We are showing data also in animal populations and migration patterns and other components that may or may not be related. But the burden of proof used to be, before you brought a product to market, you had to show that it was safe.
Exactly.
Now it's the exact opposite. We're taking this to market. We're making a lot of profit. Yes, it enhances your life, but we have no idea what it's doing to you. And in my world, when I look at, DEXA scans for bone health, and I see a right hip has less bone mass than the left hip, and you ask people, which side are you carrying your cell phone on? And they say the right pocket. Is that a causative agent? I don't know, but I don't know of anything else that would cause bone loss on just one side of the body, other than you have this device over there. So it is levels of anxiety, sleep. What are some of the symptoms or precursors that may be associated here, just to tune people into the consciousness of it? I think that's really the big component here is, like the sky is not falling. However, we don't know if it is or not. And so just educating people about what to look for, right?
For sure. And if we only talked about brain tumor, I think it's doing a big disservice to the public health space, because a brain tumor might be at the end of your life, or I mean, sometimes it happens tragically in very early, and people die prematurely. That's tragic. However, the reality is a brain tumor happens in a very small segment of cell phone users, or else these things would have been banned decades ago, right? I mean, if half the population got a brain tumor, it would have been, a public health crisis, and would have taken the technology, banned it, and called it a day, or made them much safer. So obviously, it's not an explosion of brain tumor, but there might be an increase in glioblastomas in particular, which is super concerning. But what if it's only slightly impairing the sleep of the entire population? What would that do to public health, right? What would that do to blood sugar, diabetes risk? What would that do to brain health, risk of depression, anxiety? We know that all of these things can go up if you don't sleep properly. Well, in 2008, one researcher, and just to show you how sometimes researchers do not think in health in a very holistic manner, and come to the wrong conclusions about their experiments. One researcher, and that was published in Scientific American in 2008, so that's 15 years ago, just to tell you, it's pretty old. I mean, we're talking about phone exposure from old phones at this point, almost ridiculous to think about. What they did is they took a few people that were previously sleep deprived. So they told them to barely sleep the last night. I don't know what the protocol is. And then they put a phone next to their head, as if they used the phone by the bedstand, like most people do every night. And then even after 30 minutes of exposure, they turned off the phone and they asked these people to sleep. Well, they had 1 hour more of sleep onset. So it took an hour before they could fall asleep, and they were wired up to EEG, and they discovered that it's really because the brain waves took a lot of time to recover from that exposure. The brain kept itself in a state that is of arousal, of awakeness, rather than being sleepy at night. So is this what's happening to the entire population? Well, the researchers said, it's surprising that cell phones, even though, people don't feel it or anything like that, it looks like it's shifting brainwaves. And they said, we cannot really say if cell phones are dangerous or not, because in the end, this effect is just the equivalent in arousal compared to half a cup of coffee. That's what they said. So it shows you that, just half a cup of coffee. I mean, that's such a dismissive attitude. It's crazy to me. I discovered that last month, and I've been studying the topic for years. I was very angry at this kind of thinking, because if everyone starts sipping coffee before bed, what do you think is gonna happen in a population where what is it? 25% to a third of the population cannot sleep properly. I mean, it's already a crisis of just not of a certain disease, but of wellness, right? So if we add cell phones by the nightstand, plus Wi-Fi, plus Bluetooth earbuds, plus all these things, what are we doing to sleep quality? Well, that's not even being properly investigated. I have yet to find one sleep researcher in the world that is doing experiments on, let's say, a shielded bedroom, no signal, versus people that sleep in a room with real devices. So it's not being funded. It's not being studied. So it's a big black box. What we have is rat studies, effects on the pineal gland, melatonin reduction, or the release of melatonin. So there's a lot of reasons, along with the brainwave study I mentioned, to say, well, probably your cell phone will interrupt your sleep patterns, or kind of disrupt your sleep to some degree. And who knows, maybe for Nick, it's 5%, a minute effect. I wouldn't even feel it. But maybe for my neighbor, it's 50%. We don't know. There's always a distribution curve to these things. So some people that fall on the electrosensitive spectrum might be much more affected than the next person when it comes to sleep. And the same is true for other things, such as fatigue, which obviously is very closely related to how much or how good you sleep, depression, anxiety, and also tinnitus is seen often, especially in environmental medicine doctors that I have the chance to interview. They tell me tinnitus is a very good tell sign that someone is especially sensitive to these man-made electro frequencies. But what do you do if you live in a city? What do you do if you go to Starbucks and there's 175 people like typing away on their laptops, right? So if you get tinnitus with exposures, it makes it increasingly difficult to live in a city. What are you to do? Live in a countryside? And now it becomes almost a human rights issue, because are you the problem, or is the environment problematic for certain human beings? And researchers have no idea what is the exact number of electrosensitives, those that are mild, or those that have moderate symptoms, or those that are completely debilitated. Some researchers say it's 1% to 3% that could be debilitated. Even if that's a mere fraction of that, worldwide, we're talking about a crisis that is quite extraordinary. If we talk about these people that cannot live in society, and maybe some of them don't even realize it because they live in the countryside and they don't care for all these things. But now we're rolling out satellites and more cell towers to the countryside. So these people really cannot escape for long. So that's why certain doctors are kind of spearheading our understanding of electrosensitivity, and they are able to figure out ways to lower the sensitivity of these patients so that they can keep living in the modern world. It's like if you are chemically sensitive, for example, it's just as big as a problem. You cannot really go shopping. You feel sick entering the grocery store. Sometimes there are air fresheners in the taxi that you're supposed to take, or the Uber. Well, you cannot even enter in there. You would get a headache. Some people get like dramatic impact from smelling chemicals even after a few minutes. So it is the equivalent. It's just that I think that the EMFs are being rolled out more rapidly than the new chemicals are being rolled out. In a sense, it's kind of this new modern stressor, except it's while most people would agree, okay, well, toxic chemicals, we need to minimize exposure, a lot of people don't realize we need to do the same with cell phone radiation.
Sure. Yeah, because it is, I mean, we're not even sure. Do you recommend a specific measuring device, or there is some kind of hit or miss out there in the market on those?
Yeah, well, there are some that are good just to detect sources, like to be able to tell you buy a new toaster. I mean, these days you buy a new thing and it might have Bluetooth in it. And if you have no intention of buying something with Bluetooth, like I don't want to connect my toaster to my cell phone, well, you can take the detection device and kind of say, well, it's emitting wireless, I don't want it. And you bring it back to the manufacturer. So some of them are more used to detect if something is emitting rather than have precise numbers. Because if you want precise numbers, we're talking about instrumentation that was designed by the telecom industry for telecom engineers, and we're talking about thousands of dollars. Some professionals that survey people's homes for EMF, the building biology consultants or EMF mitigation specialists, use these tools. But for the average lay person, I recommend something like the SAM ProTech 33 on my website. That's around $200, but at least you get something that where you can start quantifying your environment a little bit. Some people that are sensitive realize that this gives them ammunition to actually figure out what's wrong with them. Sometimes you don't realize you're sitting in one place. Imagine you're just sitting in, I don't know, someone invites you over. You sit in their living room. All of a sudden you start getting a headache and you're like, what's happening? You realize there's a router under the sofa where you're sitting. With a meter, you could say, well, I'm in the red zone here. What's happening? They could say, oh, yeah, that's the router. Okay, well, I'm going to sit over there, right? So if you are sensitive to an agent, you got to be able to figure out, when am I being exposed? For how long am I being exposed in this kind of environment? And for some people, they're able to handle maybe city environments, but just for a weekend. After that, they kind of feel fatigued and they feel, prematurely exhausted compared to most people. And the reality is also this: a lot of people live with these symptoms 24/7. So how can you tell if you're sensitive? Well, some environmental medicine doctors tell their patients to go camping, to go off the grid, no cell phones, no Wi-Fi, no Bluetooth thingies, and see how they feel. For some people, they feel dramatically better, which is an indication that EMFs might be at play, but so could be chemicals, mold, and other factors that are all part of environmental medicine or environmental health inside your home. So all of these things are important, and they also play off each other in a synergistic manner. If people are exposed to mold, usually they tend to be more sensitive to EMFs. I keep hearing this from mold doctors. From Lyme doctors, I hear, well, if they have Lyme and co-infections, Bartonella, and also they could be sensitive. So it's not just one thing that causes sensitivity. It looks like it's the overload, chemical exposure, physical trauma, also like concussion or whiplash. Some people have whiplash or a TBI, and then they wake up the next day, their cell phone starts almost burning their hands, tingling sensation. And they say, what is this? It's a new thing, right? Because now their entire system, their limbic brain is completely out of whack. It's super inflamed. So none of this is really published per se in the medical literature, but it is part of what these practitioners know among themselves, and they're starting to try to establish the best treatment protocols for something that is brand new and not widely recognized. So a lot of physicians, do no harm and also do good. I mean, they want to treat these people now. So they're trying their best to kind of start developing protocols. And the good news is many people do get better. Some of them are so sensitive they can barely live in a city. And after several, usually it's months to years, they're able to to greater degree lower their sensitivity so that they're able to, at least visit their relatives or take a plane from time to time or take a car. I mean, even just a car ride for some people is too bothersome. So that degree of sensitivity is just horrible to live with.
Well, you hit one. That was a big one, as we move more and more to electric cars and their batteries.
Yep.
I've used those meters in the back of Priuses, and I'm like, I kind of counsel my patients, do not get that and put your kids in there. Like that is, it's creating a field that is not super great or conductive to health of a human being, especially a small child. We do find that constellation, people are more sensitive with mold infections, Lyme, and metals. And that is a mainstay of underlying foundational health around brain health and neurodegeneration in our practice. So that's why I wanted to bring you on here and really educate our listeners and viewers on this, because you don't hear about it otherwise. And there is more and more research and evidence to support that, there's something here. Doesn't mean, let's get rid of the entire industry. That's not going to happen. However, it's getting tuned into your conscious awareness with these issues, and potentially, that's why I asked on the monitor, or what do you recommend? I mean, I know there's an array of them on the market. You've got a good resource page on your website. But being aware of it, I even had, some of my staff here at the Energy for Life Centers in Park City were concerned on 5G and EMFs. And I said, look, here's my meter. I'm walking around your workspace, and we're not showing an increase here. And so what are the things for somebody that is concerned, or like common areas or easy fixes here? Because it's not all doom and gloom.
Yeah, for sure. It's all about, creating distance between devices in your body. So it means I wouldn't keep my phone in my pocket all day, every day, like many people do. It's a matter of time of use also. If you keep your cell phone in the pocket as you take a 15-minute walk, it's not that concerning to me. But if you tell me that, you have it as you wake up in the morning, you put your jeans on, you put the phone. You sit at your office, the phone is still there, and then you go to bed and you put it on your nightstand. So you're always very close to that phone. Then I say, my God, over a lifetime, you're going to be exposed so much. So therefore, you're that much more likely to get health impacts. So, and it's the same if you keep it in your shirt pocket. There are even cardiologists who told me that they saw patients with heart troubles, heart arrhythmias of all kinds that could not be explained. And it turns out if they had the phone, they didn't feel well, and they had their heart rhythm was disrupted, which is not that it's not that special if you understand that the heart is bioelectrical like every other thing in this body, and that there could be interactions. It's just, I think that this belief comes from the idea that well, there are no interactions whatsoever. That's kind of the meme at the moment. But I mean, even I had to share that because you're into brain health. There's a good review in 2021, Effects of Electromagnetic Fields on Neuronal Ion Channels, a systematic review. And people who want the mechanisms, it looks like this is the main way that EMFs impact our body is through changing calcium homeostasis in the cell through voltage-gated calcium channels. It's been proposed by many people in biophysics who study EMFs, and that could be the primary way. If you have these calcium channels or other ion channels in the cell, and they are modified, their behavior is modified by external fields, when now we're playing with fire. It could cause oxidative damage. It could cause hormonal changes. It could cause a change in reaction time even, and brainwaves. So it's many aspects that could be impacted. So how can you avoid this? One of the things that I mentioned is distance. The other thing could be at night. You want to make sure to turn off your phone or hit airplane mode before you go and get your sleep in, but also turn off your Wi-Fi at night if you have Wi-Fi at home. Just these practices alone can greatly reduce the impact. Even if you have 1,000 Wi-Fis around you, I don't really care for it. Turn off your own Wi-Fi, because this is oftentimes the one that is closest to your body. So therefore, the effects, technically speaking, or at least theoretically speaking, are greater on your body. So sleep and distance. And then another tip that I give every entrepreneur out there, everyone who does Zooms, and most people are on Wi-Fi. That's just how it goes these days. But you can be wired in. You can have a cable running from your router to a computer, and that's just how things used to be 15 years ago, 20 years ago. When I started being online, we had cables. Wi-Fi wasn't around, and I don't know. I think I was online in '98 playing video games very early, and we had a cable for every computer. Or even if you had like you were one of the few with a laptop at the time, it was a little bit tedious. But if you stay in one place with your computer, you have a workstation like I do in this room, you don't need Wi-Fi, right? I won't move this computer around. I don't move it. If I move it, I can go on the Wi-Fi at Starbucks or something like that, and that's fine. But most of the time, I stay in one place. So if you can turn off Wi-Fi and have a cable bring the data to your computer, not only is it faster, it's more reliable, never drops off. And then if you're an author like me or someone who works at a computer 30, 40 hours per week or more, you're avoiding all of this exposure. So imagine the benefits over time. So you greatly reduce the risks. And personally, I just feel less exhausted, more energized at at the end of a day of work if I work without Wi-Fi compared to with Wi-Fi. And that's just my own experience. Everyone will have a different experience, but if you don't try it, you'll never know it either.
Yeah, that is so true. And I think minimizing or reducing your exposure is, when even if you think of it in a longevity realm, like what are these frequencies? What do they do to the body? Well, they have the potential of changing, corrupting DNA or affecting genetic expression of your body. That's where the fatigue comes from, mitochondrial toxicity, etc. So, when I work to educate my patient base, about how do we promote longevity for you and quality of life and into thriving, this is a piece of the puzzle that we really need to look at. Like, it doesn't get addressed in a conventional way.
Yeah, definitely. it's still a topic that I think doesn't have its place yet in the entire discussion of health. And that's what I'm trying to fix. It should be in there. We talk about mold so much these days. Mold, EMFs, chemicals, they all matter. It's just that oftentimes people, I don't know if they prefer not to think or talk about EMFs. It's a very inconvenient topic, and it needs to be at the forefront. We need to talk about these exposures.
Yeah, but just because you don't think it's happening doesn't mean that it's not, right? You can't
Exactly.
put your stand anymore.
Yeah.
Well, Nick, thank you so much. Is there any last parting words you'd like to share with our listeners and viewers?
Well, just again, when it comes to a neat topic, when you learn about all the sources of EMFs through my book and courses and things like that, it can feel overwhelming. Just try to modify your habits one at a time. If you take something out of this presentation or my work, turn off your cell phone at night, or set it, further away from your nightstand, not 1 foot from your head, aim for 6 feet. It's going to make a difference. Even if you don't necessarily feel it does, it's a preventative measure. It's a sort of preventative medicine for your body. And I know for sure, because I'm looking at the direction of the science and what has been published since I started this work in 2016. And you're going to hear about it. You're going to hear many more studies to come. The controversy will get bigger and bigger. And those who start now reducing their exposure, they're going to be just in a healthier place moving forward. And you might find that you were one of the sensitive ones, and you feel much better once you start doing so.
I love it. And thanks for ending that way with the curiosity, and just run an experiment for yourself. Like you don't know until you try. Thank you so much, the EMF guy, Nicolas Pineault. This is What the Health, everybody. Thank you for tuning in. I wouldn't be doing it but for you. And if you like today's show, please give us a 5-star rating and give a little review of what you learned. What are your take homes from what was shared here today? These are really awesome things for you, your family, and community to learn and know about. Thanks for tuning in. Much love. See you next week.